record to the cloud. Okay. Thank you, Linda. Please welcome Gaga. Welcome to our event. Obviously, this is a very unique movie, something that no one has actually come close to achieving until now. Maybe you can explain how you and Michael met and how this project actually got started as a beginning.
Thanks for inviting me. I also apologize. I will occasionally be smoking, and I know it's a bad habit and one shouldn't be doing that, but there's the habit I can't get rid of, still, which means my apologies to everybody who finds offense, in this, but I have to do it, unfortunately. Anyway, Michael Berenbaum and I go back for a couple of decades, and I've been living in the States for 30 years now. And I was very familiar, with his work and what he has done as a, professor, and especially Holocaust studies, etc., etc. And of course, when I kind of got the idea, rather the idea was always in the air, but when I kind of felt like the time has come to do a movie on Jasenovac concentration camps, I went first to Michael and had a very, very thorough discussion about the whole subject and the historical and political aspects, of that project. We also jointly decided to kind of take approach to tell the story through the life of one family first and foremost, and within that family through the little girl Dara. And there were like several reasons to kind of take that approach in terms of story narrative. That allowed us to kind of have this kid who is forced to grow up overnight in most horrific circumstances, surrounded by, death, by the evil things, and fighting for the survival and fighting for her family and for her little brother all the time. That gave a tremendous kind of a journey of that character throughout the movie, and brought a lot of, let's say, emotional content to it. Also, by selecting the narrative, which is telling the story through the eyes of the kid, we were able to depict all those horrors, but not to be all the time with the horrors. We were always able to back off and to get into the kid's eyes and continue emotional ride, but without really depicting all the horrors. There are a lot of horrors in the movie. It's hard to watch, but it's watchable. And that was the very big task we were kind of trying to accomplish, because you can't do the justice to the subject matter without showing what was happening. At the same time, if you make it too much of a bloodletting and too much of the horrors, people will not be able to watch the movie, and then movie loses its, let's say, purpose. The difference between Jasenovac concentration camps and the German run camps in the Eastern Europe was that basically all the killings were done in a very personal, primitive, most brutal way, with knives, sledgehammers, bullets in the head, various horrible things, burying people alive in the ground, etc., etc. And that's why this was a very challenging story to be told, because you have to show those things to a certain extent. That's why we opted to have a story be told, through the eyes of this kid, And Michael and I kind of decided early on to basically take one approach, which we were very, very careful that all the things depicted in the movie were true, which means there was no fiction per se, because the events were such that we didn't need anything extra to create or to do the fictional count of the things. It's almost like letting the history unfold before your eyes. We were very, very careful, and then the whole story, everything told in the movie did happen. It is to a certain extent composite truth, because, for instance, this second camp, they go to, I called it the old mill near Gradiška concentration camp. And basically that kind of stands a little bit for Gradiška, a little bit for Charles Camp Jastrebarsko, because if you want to tell one story, the whole story what took place through eyes one person, you have to kind of do a little bit things like that. But all the events did happen, maybe not necessarily one person witnessed all of them, but they kind of represent the composite, let's say, truth and the facts about Jasenovac. We did not go into any fictional accounts or unproven things from some, iffy testimonies, etc. Only things which were part of even, court proceedings after the war, or some, books and very exact data on the whole situation. We also knew that this movie is not going to be easy to basically place in the world, because there was not a single movie prior to that feature on Jasenovac. There were documentaries. There was one which had some little bit of a fiction, but was mostly documentary. But this was the first, heads on the subject matter. And the emotions still run very high in Balkans, because we had these wars in the 90s. We had then, Second World War and events which Dara of Jasenovac depicted, but also there was a First World War prior to that, and so forth and so forth. And what basically Western civilization, for whatever reasons, maybe sometimes political, sometimes selfish, sometimes to justify certain actions they took, they always like to start the account with the 90s, but you said very, very, very clearly, and we knew that was the case, because you cannot just take it out of the occasion, previous, historic events, because they became part of a collective consciousness of various ethnic groups. And emotions run high, even like a couple of days ago, the 22nd was the day when basically was commemorated the liberation of Jasenovac, and Croatian president spoke there and made some very nasty remarks about his version of the history, and who were the victims, and Serbs were resisting, and basically almost justifying what they did. But he also did mention that Serbia made a very bad movie about Jasenovac, which is Dara, which means it's hurting a little bit certain people, and the very existence of this movie is still somehow problematic. On the other hand, I wish this movie has been made decades ago, because it probably would have bring the ethnic groups closer to each other. There will be some process of purification or cleansing, and healing, to start some healing and reconciliation. But, the communist time, they kind of, people knew about Jasenovac, but that was never ever fully, let's say, presented in its horrors, and was never a part of a various kind of discussions between the ethnic groups, etc. It was like hush-hush issue. And then, of course, whatever you try to hide today is going to come back and bite you next day. And that basically became like one chapter in this saga of the relationship in the Balkans between the various ethnic groups. I'm very glad we made the movie. As you said, the movie did cause a controversy. Personally, I'm extremely happy with the movie. I think the movie by itself, movie for the movie, if you just eliminate the other aspects of it, is very strong, very emotional, and very professional, let's say, feature. And I'm very proud of that as a director. Now, when you get from that point on, in terms of political aspects of the picture and what that did transpire, we obviously, as you said, had a various attacks on the movie. Some of the, newspapers and let's say the people who reviewed the movie called it Serbian propaganda. And obviously that was not the case, not intention, it wasn't intention. But, some people kind of felt there is no need for this kind of a movie, that making this movie was excuse or trying to find excuse for what happened in the 90s, etc., etc. It will be equal, like, as you say, for instance, so you guys in Israel are mistreating Palestinians now, therefore you should not make a Schindler List or forever, And that's why I think the movie by itself will survive, because it's a strong movie. It's based on correct facts. And, in the years to come, it's going to basically find its place where it should be. And it will be a document. And I wish people will make now more movies on that subject matter. But it's not going to be easy, because still, as we see, there are like political climates which are kind of not allowing that. And it's very challenging for every director professionally to get onto the story like Jasenovac. Personally, I had to kind of make sure that in this first movie, I kind of put most of the things people knew about Jasenovac and expected to see in the movie. And future projects or movies can then take just a partial thing or segment after this movie being made, and then treat that segment, not necessarily being forced to take the story as a whole. Anyway, that's just for little, let's say, intro.
Gaga, is it true that the Dara character is based on a real person?
Basically, there is a woman whose testimony we used as the idea for the whole story, that she was separated from her little brother Ilya, and her name was Jasmina Buhac, and then basically when Diana Budis came, she took them, from the camp, and they ended up separated, and they never actually reunited to this day. She's alive, and not know is he alive, and that's basically something which was kind of idea, but pretty much what we did was the name Dara was coming after the grand, how we call it, grand aunt of writer Natasha Drakulic, Darinka Grujic, and her kind of the fate of her family, that there were like 6 of them, killed in Jasenovac. That's how the name came about. And then every other kind of event which took place was based on the books by, Milsha and Berger and Nikolic and many other people who wrote the accounts of Jasenovac, even Rodoljub Čolaković, etc. There was like 20 different things we read and studied, and kind of pulled out some, events from there which we felt should serve the narrative we want to tell.
I think we're getting a little bit of noise from somewhere, but I want to welcome Michael Berenbaum, Dr. Michael Berenbaum, who is the author or editor of 18 books and dozens of important articles. Welcome, Michael. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
I think we're getting some music feedback from someone. I don't know where that's coming from exactly, but maybe.
I think it's coming from Mina.
Okay, wait.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, Michael, I guess I would ask Gaga this question as well, but what do you make of these criticisms? When I read these criticisms in Variety and Los Angeles Times, it seemed to me as though this is like very poor journalism, or very, very uneducated writers writing about the Holocaust, and they do not seem to have very much knowledge of the subject. But in any case, they seem to have had quite a negative impact. What's your take on all of that?
Well, my first take is I was very surprised by the nature of the argument in Variety. Let's deal with Variety, for example. I don't understand if you're making a Holocaust film which shows Germans as perpetrators. I don't know what the offense is if it portrays German in the role of perpetrators as they were perpetrators.
Right.
I think that this film shows the Croats in the role that they played during Jasenovac. It also omits in a very basic way understanding the way in which the film presented Croats also in a decent light, in a saving light. The rescue of Dara and her brother was done by a woman who was operating on behalf of the Red Cross, which was taking children out of the camp. The very idea that a woman would leave her child, which we show at the very beginning of the film, that a woman would leave her child in the field because she knew she could not protect the child, also shows a degree of trust and compassion. And the reality is what the reality is. We can't rewrite history. We have to present history with a measure of authenticity and integrity. And that's, if that's the accusation that's made against the film, you wear it as a badge of honor. So I was taken aback by the criticism. And certainly one of the problems with all of this is that people are not arguing about the film and they're not arguing about the past. They're arguing for the basic ethnic conflict that has been going on for, I would dare say, centuries, and that has not been resolved. The honest portrayal or the compelling portrayal of the experience of Jasenovac should be praised. It hasn't been done.
Michael, how did you get involved in the project originally? I mean, I know Gaga has told us that you've known each other for quite a long time, but how did you get involved in this?
My basic crime in all of this is I'm a friend of Gaga's, and I admit it.
Okay.
And the other thing is our wives have worked together. So we found ourselves attending all sorts of professional obligations as spouses, and in which everybody knew everybody else, and we decided that we would hang out together. We found out that we had a mutual interest. When Gaga wanted to do this film, he had the bad judgment of turning to me and asking me if I would read the script and if I would comment on what I thought he should do. And we've continued this. Our friendship is such that we had lunch together yesterday. And again, if my crime is my friendship with Gaga, I plead guilty, and I wear it as a badge of honor and decency. Gaga's a filmmaker. I have consulted on non-documentary films. I've done documentary films. So I think I have the judgment as to what you can and cannot do. And one of the things that we wrestled with is how do you present it? Now, Gaga, in Jewish tradition, we say you can't praise a person fully to his face, but I'm not seeing him merely on Zoom. So let's say that Gaga really went deeply concerned with portraying it accurately, did something quite remarkable, which is that he decided to do something bold and interesting, which is to see the event through the eyes of a child. And one of the issues whenever you deal with films of this type of takes you into the inner courtyard of the killing process, is that the question is how much violence do you show? Now, part of what Gaga did, which was really quite, and the most violent scene in the whole movie, obviously, is the Ring Around the Rosie, not the Ring Around Rosie, the musical chairs scene. And the reality is that Gaga, the original of that is worse than what was portrayed. The original of that was among children, not among adults. But Gaga takes us away from that. The director takes us away from that as we look into the eyes of Dara as she's seeing this. And it's a tribute to her acting ability that she wasn't seeing that. He didn't allow the children to see those types of scenes, but he allowed us to see it through her eyes and therefore to imagine what was happening. And our imagination made it even more brutal than the way in which he portrayed it. Let me give you a bad example, but an important example, which I use when I speak to filmmakers about that. What is the difference between an erotic film and a pornographic film? In a pornographic film, nothing is left to the imagination. You see everything. In an erotic film, your imagination fills in for what you don't see. And that is much more romantic and much more enticing and ultimately much more interesting and far more erotic than seeing everything. So the audience is being asked to fill in for the violence it doesn't see. And therefore, when people comment about the nature of violence in there, they're really commenting not only on what they saw, but on what they didn't see and what they imagined. And therefore, you're not a passive judge in all of this, but you are sort of engaged, you're involved, you're moved, you're charged, you're ashamed to see this, but it's your imagination that is triggered in the entire thing. Plus, he showed multiple perspectives, and Jasenovac is a complex camp. It's a complex camp with multiple victims. He also showed, for example, the Germans who understood why you killed Jews, but had no idea why the hell you'd be interested in killing Serbs. So the Jasenovac did some of the work of the Germans for the Germans by killing the Jews, and some of the work for the Croats by killing the Serbs, and certainly for the Ustasha regime by killing the Serbs, because we don't have to label all the Croats with the same brush. So that Gaga essentially used me for a little bit of moral support and a little bit of sense of what the boundary lines are and what we do.
Did either of you have any conversation with the critics? I mean, did you have a conversation with any of them?
I sent a letter to Variety, which was not published.
Ah. Not surprising. Michael, let me ask you a question. Why is it that actually Gaga could speak to this as well. Why haven't there been films made about Jasenovac or about the Holocaust in Yugoslavia in the past? I mean, this is of course a great film, but you would expect maybe that there would have been more dramatic.
Yeah, if I say, there were like, let's say there was one movie I called The Ninth Circle or whatever, which at the end of the movie kind of a Jasenovac is mentioned, but was never fully, let's say, depicted, you know, and it's kind of the issue is touched by the fishing pole, you know, somewhere remotely, etc., etc. There were documentary movies. There was a good movie on rise of the Ustashi regime in Croatia called The Occupation 26 Pictures by Lordan Zafranović. That was also way back in late 70s. but theoretically, the first Ninth Circle was in the 60s, but theoretically, none of those movies entered into the heart of darkness called Jasenovac's camp, and all these horrors which unfolded there. And we were basically always feeling, maybe because of communism and Tito, who kind of like that, policy of brotherhood and unity between the different ethnic groups. And they did not want that to be really very strong and very present, in a consciousness. They had a historic books about that. There were some, things. There's no question about that. There was a memorial built in Jasenovac, back in the day. But their focus was more to make the movies which were celebrating the communist, struggle against the Germans, but as well as against the political enemies during the Second World War in former Yugoslavia. And that's why I think it was somehow brushed aside and left unattended, which I think was a horrible mistake. And we saw in the 90s, the tensions and everything was running very high. And clearly now, I think that we did manage with this movie, in spite the some people calling it Serbian propaganda, etc., etc. But the whole subject matter became very present and very, very visible, even on the international level. Those reviews are non-reviews, these are more like a political statements, because the guy in Variety writes 1.5 sentences about the movie itself. He says that the ending is corny for him, and I actually show very kind of a professional Hollywood-like skills about making that movie. That's about it. And everything else was a story about that this movie shouldn't have been, seen or sent outside of Serbia, that this movie was made as excuse of a Serbian behavior in the 90s, etc., etc., etc. The guy in the LA Times even went further, step further, and essentially was stating that I was trying to drive the point that the Jasenovac's camp for the Serbs and and for the kids, and the truth is, it was, and it kind of turned out to be a meaningless thing to discuss the movie with these people, because they didn't write about the movie. They wrote more about some, let's say, their impression of political or propaganda intentions of the movie. And we feel very comfortable knowing that we were like really trying to come up with the facts, and we did not invent those things. Like, instance, you have like a Luburić speech at the ceremony in the movie, where they're like all these Serbian kids who were dressed now as young Ustaše, Croatian kids. They did the process of actual footage exists, from the ceremonies like that, which Luburić organized, etc. And that speech is his original speech, which he gave like us after the Second World War, but was recorded on radio. In other words, that's not even let's say some improv on the whole situation. In other words, I believe that we had the heart at the right place with this picture, and that's why I strongly believe that in the years to come, this movie will be some sort of a icebreaker for the whole subject matter in the Balkans. And it's really important that people in the Balkans sit down and they look each other in the eye, and they don't try to say, "Oh, you were bad to me, this time, but then I was bad to you, maybe, but you were bad to me, before," and so forth. But it's important to discuss openly the whole long history of these very similar, rather close ethnic groups, which basically are at each other's throats every once in a while in the Balkans.
Look, this is what we call contested history. Contested history is people can't agree on the past in part because they can't agree on the present, and in part because they want the past to serve the agenda of the present. And it also, ironically, this is a region in which some of those divisions were hammered over. I don't want to say papered over, but hammered over during the Tito era, which and then fell apart, and the post-Tito era became subject of violence in the 90s, and consequently we're still living in the aftermath. I also, for example, worked in, I did the museum in Skopje, in what is now North Macedonia. So there was a question. Bulgaria wants to present itself as the heroic rescuers who saved more Jews than Denmark, but only wants to present itself that way without dealing with the role of Bulgaria in deporting the Jews of Thrace and Macedonia. And even Greece doesn't want, think of this, Greece doesn't want Macedonia to use the name Macedonia because what most people know about Macedonia is the word Philip of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. So we're dealing with a question of how Greek's identity deals with Macedonian identity from 300 years before the Common Era, from the fourth century before the Common Era. So you're talking about a long contested history in Macedonia before it could be admitted, and it's not yet admitted to the European Union or to any participation in the West, had to change its name from Macedonia to North Macedonia, had to change the name of the airport from Alexander the Great Airport to the airport of Skopje. I mean, this is a contested era. And what I've learned in working in the region is an interesting thing politically, which is nobody liked the Dayton Accords, but every side believes that the other guy lost more. Nobody won, but everybody will tell you if you travel in the region, and I'm a reasonably objective observer, you know, we got screwed by the Dayton Accords, but you should see what they did too. In that, and I learned that in certain agreements, you don't need winners and losers. You merely need losers and losers, but everybody has to believe the other guy lost more. And that's part of the contested history.
What was the name? What was the name of the museum that you worked on in North Macedonia?
The name of the museum is the Holocaust Memorial to the Jews of Macedonia.
Uh-huh.
Tom asked if my letter could be seen. I put my letter in the chat box, so everybody can see it. If I haven't yet done it, maybe I just haven't done. Okay, now it's in the chat in the chat box, so you have a copy of the letter to Variety.
Why do you think that the whole story of Jasenovac, and I mean, why hasn't it been dealt with by scholars in general? I mean, why has
well, let's begin. It's been dealt with in very peculiar ways. Number one, you need people who master the languages of the region. Number two, you have an attempt at Holocaust denial by Tushman, who was the leader in the 1990s, and that was a problem. Secondly, I worked on a book years ago with a scholar, Milan Bulajic,
yeah.
who had very important access to material. But it was very difficult to, I tried to mediate between him presenting his history fiercely, in which every time the other side was mentioned, fascist, genocidist, et cetera, and get it in a way that it could be regarded as I don't even want to say moderate, but as a historical treatment. And I spent months toning him down. And I'm usually not a person toning one down to be able to feature his scholarship, but it becomes difficult to present it in the West if your tonal thing is one of fierce polemics instead of history that's presented with the guise of objectivity. And remember something else, that Jasenovac is a complex history. 5 camps, multiple victims, ways in which it was presented, not a death camp not established by the Germans, not established by the Nazis. So it's a complex history which has to be presented with an acute sensitivity to its complexity. And again, a children's camp, a place which the Germans used to call body disposal, a place in which you dealt with the question of burying the victims in order to deal with it. A children's camp. All of these are elements of the complexity that is Jasenovac. It was Jasenovac.
Gaga, is this film going to be shown in Europe? Does it have distribution in Europe?
Yes and no, depending on the countries. First of all, film was shown on national TV in Serbia. At that point, there were tons of illegal copies which just flew around, let's say, interested ethnic groups, per se, which means most of the people have seen the movie of, let's say, the Balkan origin, at least the people who were interested in seeing the movie. Movie will be shown, in some countries, unfortunately, like, for instance, we have for the Nordic countries, all the arrangement, but nobody's doing anything because of, theaters are not essentially being fully in function. And the movie will be shown in also Russia, in China, in, some countries. Israel is the Israeli ambassador to Belgrade is organizing, as we speak, a screening in Tel Aviv, for the movie over there for some, charitable, purposes. And then it will go from there and probably will end up on one of the televisions there, etc., because movie will be shown. It's going on video on demand now. I don't know which platform, but I'll find out. I'm meeting with the people from 1 Studios. It will be shown pretty much. It will be accessible around the world, and then it's basically, since everything happened in the time of a Corona, which we had that additional, problem. Like, for instance, we never went to the theaters in Canada because they never opened the theaters. We ran the movie around the United States. And in even Serbia, I just had a qualifying Oscar run for a week last year, but we decided to show a movie on the national TV because the interest was such, and we could not wait like fall of this year to start showing the movie in the theaters because people wanted to see it. And the movie will be seen. It will be there, to answer your question. In terms of Croatia, I think they already saw the movie because, like, when it was aired in Bosnia, on the TV, they were able to also watch, the movie. And as I said, on the YouTube, we were trying to take down all these, pirated copies. But as you take one down, the other one pops up. And I don't see any purpose of making it, let's say, any kind of a theatrical run. However, we did offer to the Croatian Association of Journalists, even before the movie was shown, for them to screen the movie, and they responded that they can't do it at that time because they are remodeling their building. And then we said, we will rent the theater for you. I mean, invite all the membership, and they're free to write whatever they want about the movie, but at least have them see the movie, because they were writing a lot before the movie was even seen, And there were some good voices, in terms of in Croatia, and some, historians kind of praise the movie and its accuracy, and and even the quality of the movie and the achievement of the movie, which means it's not always just black and white situation like nowhere is. But as I said, even the president of Croatia trashed the movie 2 days ago, found it kind of to score some points, with I guess voters, which means in that climate, I don't know. For us, is important. Is there. It's going to be on a platform. It's going to be present. It's going to be in some countries, on the TV, and essentially this subject matter now is much more known than it was before, and we'll open discussions like this one. And even if people write bad things about the movie, a lot of people will say, okay, let me see what that is, and they'll Google it and find out at least some other information about the Jasenovac camps. And that's why I kind of think movie fulfilled its purpose and remains to be seen. But I strongly believe that being such a powerful and emotional picture, and being based on facts and not on some falsified things, it will stay for years to come, in decades.
But what about Germany, the German-speaking countries?
We did not talk to anybody there yet, because it was we will because we will try to definitely make some sort of a deal that it goes, but if it goes on a platform here, some large platform, it will be accessible in many countries in the world, and then essentially it will be very difficult then to strike some separate deals for showing the movie. We had the audience in Germany. We would normally make a theatrical run there, and there are a lot of people from Balkans there, plus there will be some people interested, but because of the corona, we were not able to do that.
Well, I think that German-speaking people need to see this film, because Germany's involvement is central to the rise of the Ustascha and also Jasenovac. So Germans need to learn about this.
We shouldn't forget Italians.
Yeah,
Italians were firsthand witnesses of these events, and in some cases intervened. Even Italian fascists intervened to save Serbs. And so there is an audience in Italy who have people alive today who witnessed this. And I think that that's an audience that we could reach as well, and really should reach.
Now, the Italian role throughout was fascism without fanaticism. And the Italians, I've written a little bit about it. The Italians were peculiar, having lived with the Vatican so long. They did not take ideology with the same fierceness that other groups came. And I looked at and remember Italy had one of the lowest figures of Jewish dead in all of Europe, and part of that had to do with I won't even call it rescue, but a couple of examples. Police chief comes to a guy whom he knows is hiding Jews and said, "We have an order to round up Jews tomorrow at 12 noon. I wouldn't like to find many of them in your care." Another one is my favorite story from the whole Holocaust of rescue is a priest who is asked at a monastery, "Are you hiding Jews?" And he was a man who was known for his absolute integrity and never lied. So he began by saying, "Why would you imagine that I would hide Jews? They murdered our Lord, and they deny his mission." And he goes on into a whole range of accusations from church history against the Jews. And the police chief says, "But you haven't answered my question." And he says, "Well, if you're asking me the question, the answer is no. And he writes in his, and the police official says, if you tell me no, then I believe it's no. And he writes in his diary, I hope when I meet my maker at the end of my days, that this will be my greatest sin, lying and misleading. And for those of you who know philosophy, it's a problem of dealing with Kant's categorical imperative, because Kant would say you have to universalize everything, and therefore you should not lie under any circumstances. But if that's your greatest sin, you are the saint of all saints in history. And the other is the Italians just, if you had a choice between having lunch and rounding up Jews, why would you disturb your lunch?
Typical Italian response, yeah.
Typical Italian response. And, you have the reality is those are stereotypes, but you can find evidence for that throughout. By the way, just to give you a sense of ethnic divisions, I did a book many years ago with a Pole who became a leader of Italian resistance. Now, a Polish Jew. Now, how did a Polish Jew become a leader of Italian resistance? Two family clans that dominated northern Italy could not agree with each other. They all agreed that they wanted to oppose German invasion and the final solution, but they couldn't agree that one person from the other clan be the leader of the group. So they decided that this Polish Jew, who was in Italy because he went over the Alps and ended up in Italy, he would be the person who led both groups because he was a member of neither clan. And that, again, ethnic tensions, even among the same people, are absolutely deep and profound. So, it happened, things happen all over the place with that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Let's go back also. I think it's important that we give Gaga credit for very small elements of it that have power. There's a scene there in which a woman refuses to go off to Germany and therefore is shot along with her son because she refuses to be separated from her son. I want Gaga to tell us who played that role and who played that scene and why it had the remarkable power that it had.
Yeah, it was actually the writer of the screenplay, Natasha Drakulic, and she played her not grandmother's sister, or something like that.
Great aunt.
Yeah. And that's basically, she said, I'm gonna do this because that's what happened, and she played that role. And then we were saying, like, okay, now when she fires the shot, you should kind of go soft knees just down, almost sit on the ground outside of the camera frame. But then she said, no, that's not how it should happen. And she just fell directly, like a head on the ground, hard on, and that was her contribution, but she did a good acting job for that little scene.
Well, again, it's a little scene which seems to be dramatic license, and it's not dramatic license, it's history, which is in the deepest sense of the term personal history to the writer, and therefore the writer played, if there was one scene she wanted to play, that was the scene to play.
Yeah, she
had little details with that.
She has like 20 people from the wider family who basically perished in various, Ustaše riots, on the area, or camp, on Jasenovac camp, etc., etc. Sorry, for her, this was very personal.
I see that Dragana has very politely raised her hand, which I would recommend everyone else do if they want to ask a question. Dragana, please go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Doing that right now. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dragana Tomasevic, and I'm of a Jasenovac and Holocaust Memorial Foundation, a UK registered charity here in Britain with a base in London. First of all, I'd like to say a huge thank you for both Mr. Antonijević and Mr. Berenbaum for making this Hollywood-style movie. It's the first thing we've ever witnessed in our lifetime. And in the words of Dr. Bastasic from Jadovno, which is here present tonight, I think he rightly captured a moment of what we witnessed in Serbia, and that is that this movie has made a tectonic shift in the nation. I was rather mute witnessing it from London, but that's what happened. The nation, the whole nation started awakening, which was absolutely amazing to see. And it's thanks to Dara. Had that not happened, we wouldn't have that. But tectonic shift was made, and I hope that this will inspire you guys to make another similar movies, and I hope it will inspire other people to make something similar. Talking about that true character, Barry. Thank you, Mr. Antonijević, for mentioning Majka. You'll be interested to know that she fell in the bathroom when that LA Times article came through. She fell in the bathroom, and 2 days later, she was at the press conference with her hand in the sling. And she said something absolutely amazing. She said, even if I broke my hips and my legs, I would come crawling to this press conference to tell the whole world that Dara is true. I'm standing 100% behind this movie because that Dara, that is me. And that's press conference in Belgrade some time ago. Two interesting facts. You'd be interested to know that in the time of the screening of Dara of Jasenovac in Bosnia, the whole region of Kozarska Dubica and Prijedor blacked out in that right moment when the screening started. And you'll be also interested to know that Logoraši, the Surviving Inmates Association, took a solicitor to write to LA Times. And I'm not sure, Mr. Antonijević, do you know that they got a response? They got an apology. We can't.
Gaga, you have to unmute. Sorry.
I don't know. I don't think that they did. I probably would have been told if they did.
They have.
They have.
They have. I know that. I spoke to Chicagoico. They took a solicitor. The solicitor managed to write some sort of an email. How he managed that in English, I don't know. But long story short, they had an apology.
But wait a minute, what kind of an apology? We're sorry our reporter is an idiot, or we're sorry that our reporter lied.
Oh my God.
You know, an apology is an apology, but
yes,
it matters what they said. Please just send a copy to Barry. We need to read that.
Listen, they apologized for any inconvenience caused to them, but they've never published it.
Well, that's not an apology.
For hurting their feelings. That's what
you know, we can't call these things apologies. I'm named for a man who was killed at Jadovno. First, he had his face smashed in front of City Hall in Vinkovci. He was the mayor. He was sent to Jadovno, tied up at the wrists, and among the very first people to go down that hole. And I bear his name, and I can't allow people to say, oh, it's an inconvenience that we lied. I'm really hoping that as a result of today's Zoom meeting, we ask Mr. Antonijević and Mr. Berenbaum whether they would be willing to work with anybody else interested in doing so, to have a face-to-face, even by Zoom, with the people who wrote those misleading, and which I think are intentionally misleading, but I can't prove it, articles and commentaries. And I think that we shouldn't take no for an answer. And a simple printed apology that was never published doesn't begin to scratch the surface of this issue. And I believe that this has to be pursued, because if it isn't pursued, I don't know what we're doing.
Right. By the way, I'd ask everyone to raise their hand so that we don't have too much. No, I mean in the future.
It's retroactive.
No,
Sorry.
no, no. There's a little there's a I think if you go to down below.
You go to reactions. You go to reactions at the bottom of the screen. You click on with the left click on reactions, and you say lower or raise the hand.
Right.
So reactions, and you'll find the hand.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Georgia Conforti wants to ask a question. So
sorry, could I just?
Oh, you didn't finish. I'm so sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Jumped in. Also, I wanted to let you know that as a direct descendant of survivors of Croatian genocide, I had a solicitor write a letter to LA Times. I let it 3-4 days just to see how I feel about it, and then I actually went on and I asked my solicitor to write them a letter. 4 days later, the email bounced. So we've stopped at that. And also, if Mr. Antonijević and Mr. Berenbaum ever wants to come to London, and if they need any sort of help and support, we are here.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you. Sorry, and also a big thank you to Mr. Antonijević for supporting the resolution of Logorashi. JRA, Barry and I also supported it, and thank you for supporting them. I hope Mr. Berenbaum does the same thing. Thank you.
Mr. Conforti, I want to call on you.
Yes.
You had your hand up.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. Yes. All right. So I just wanted to say I absolutely support what Mr. Bosnich said. And that it has to be some, I think there should be, the Los Angeles Times should be really, really sued. And there should be, or something, I don't know, any pressure has to, much more pressure has to be put on them, because that was really appalling article. In Variety, it was, at least it gave some background. The author of the article in Variety said that was what happened there, that the Jasenovac existed and this and that, and it was a concentration camp and all that. But then he provided his view. So, but this one was really appalling because everything said there was wrong, and it's just a cheap propaganda. And I would just, it's really cheap propaganda. It's not even for the kindergarten, but since people don't know about it, I mean, they think it's something that it's true. I don't know who this Jay, what's his name? Yeah, I don't know what is his, I mean, is he somebody who is known, or who is, I don't know, or he's just some kind of clown, but it's a pure propaganda. And I will tell you one more thing. When I read that it was just the camp for Jews, and that was all about the stories about Serbs were invented. I mean, I was really surprised. I didn't understand where did he, because his name appears like Jewish name, right? I'm also Jew. I'm also Jewish, and I know those tricks. Those tricks come from Croatia, right? I mean, from not let's say from the supporters of Ustashi. And the thing is, when you have, for example, there was, I tell you, there was a trial of Andrija Artuković. He was the minister in Ustasha government. And he was at some point when he was, I don't know, 90 years old, and he couldn't even move. He was deported by United States to the Croatia, but they kept him there for a long, long time. And then he was just a sad, looking old man. But you know, his lawyer was a Serbian lawyer, of course, right? So they maybe this person who wrote that the article is innocent, but they used his Jewish sounding name as to have an effect on those who read the article. Also, just a few days ago, there was about the stupid things that Croatian president said on Jasenovac. I learned certain things, and then I understood better how this worked, this cheap propaganda, because he repeated things like that it was only for Jews, and there were some Serbs, but they were actually, he said, those are the enemies of the state, of independent state of Croatia, Ustashi state, so they had to go to some camp, right? But the only people who were killed because of their religion or race were Jews. That's what he said. And then I read other people said that this is actually it came from President of Croatia, Franjo Tuđman, right? He was the first president of Croatia in the 90s, right? When the communist regime in Yugoslavia fell. And he was really strongly supported by the Ustašian immigrants who flocked to Croatia when Yugoslavia got, it was in 92. They flocked to Croatia and they supported his campaign. I mean, they were well organized in Western Europe. I mean, they had money, they had everything. Why was that? That's also a question. Why the Western countries allow that? But, you know, it's a political thing. It's a global, it's something that has to do with the global politics. But he actually, so that's what Tuđman used, exactly this idea. And how this guy got this idea, this is something who wrote the article. I think that's something that he would have to explain. How did he learn about it? Where did he get that idea? I'm sure that it's all coming from the same kitchen, from the supporters of Ustaša regimes, and Ustaša, they're alive very well are doing in Croatia. It's coming from them. How did he get connected with them and how did he got it? I don't know. That is something to be questioned. Okay, that's all what I wanted to say.
Okay, does anybody know the answers to that? I don't think anybody knows the answers to those questions.
Actually,
yeah, go ahead. Well, I do want to call on Dusan. He's next online. But
okay.
Dusan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you, Barry, for this conference. Then thank you for this monument for Jadovno Gospić Park concentration camp. It was your initiative. And when I was in New York a few years ago on your conference, I couldn't believe that this will happen, but it has happened. And you know that only because of this this bloody corona, I was not able to attend your conference.
It took about 8 years, Dusan, but we got it done.
Yeah. Now, first of all, I have to say that I really, first of all, personally, I'm very grateful for this great film. Not only because I'm the founder and the actual president of Jadovno 1941 Association here in the Republic of Srpska, Banja Luka, but also because it was my father was like a boy of 11 and a half year old from Bilogora, from Grubišno Polje. He was arrested and not only him, end of October 1942, and he spent 2 months in Jasenovac, and he was the only one survivor from Bilogora Monte, from this region. So when I have seen this Dara from Jasenovac, I have seen it like Milan. It was the name of my father, Milan from Jasenovac. And Mr. Mašević said that this movie here in the region was made some kind of tectonic movement, tektonski poremećaj, really. And I hope that this will be some kind of crossroad between this, what we have done in the last 30 years. And I think that from the, let's say from 1995, after this civil war, nobody has forbidden us to make such films or such efforts. But we can wait till now, and I hope that something will change now. That we will see more films, more movies, exhibitions, and that we will see some changes, some new materials in the books. If you look at the books, what children are learning in the elementary school and popular school and secondary school, you will not believe that about genocide against Serbs and Roma and Holocaust. You will find only 4.5 pages, and half of these are the pictures. You will find that in these books much more about Rommel in North Africa and D-Day, much more than about genocide and the Holocaust. So I hope that this film will move forward, or first of all, our institutions to make some significant efforts to change this, what has happened, what they have done in the last 30 years. Thanks.
You know, Dusan, you brought up something interesting. The bad reviews of the movie actually did refer to Jasenovac as being part of the Holocaust, which I thought was impressive, because there are people who want to say that this has nothing to do with the Holocaust and it's somehow unrelated, you know, an unrelated event or somehow detached from larger story of the Holocaust.
This what because what I was said when I have seen that there was no any word in this movie that Jadovno, Gospić and Pag concentration camp complex was the forerunner of Jasenovac concentration camp, and that this was well planned complex in Lika Valley on Velebit and on the island Pag, and part of this Adriatic Sea channel between island Pag and Velebit, and that important Italian fascist role was very important in this period, because they have closed the camp, and then Ustašas, not Ustašas, but independent state of Croatia, because it was the state program, well organized and planned program. They were forced to establish Jasenovac camp, and the first inmates in Jasenovac were those few hundreds of survivors which were transported from Gospić by railway to Jasenovac. They were the first inmates. I know that you, Barry, know, and John, you and Mr. Mashevi, they know these facts, but I'm talking about this because other participants of this conference.
Before I go to the other hands that have been raised, I wanted to ask Michael a question. Did you at least see something positive in the fact that they do want to include the story? I mean, that Jasenovac at least is being treated now as part of the larger history of the Holocaust.
Well, I think that's very useful for the remembrance of Jasenovac, because of the fact that the Holocaust is so clearly a defining event of 20th century humanity, and therefore worthy of remembrance throughout. Part of what we have anyhow is when you associate something with the Holocaust, it sort of intensifies its importance. We were careful to both indicate where it paralleled and where it differed, and that is that it did the dirty job of killing the Jews of Serbia. It shipped Jews from Jasenovac to Auschwitz. It did killing there, but it also was primarily a vehicle for the killing of other peoples. And that becomes, again, part of what's important to the story itself.
I always remember what you wrote in your book, Mosaic of Victims. You said that the uniqueness of the Jewish experience in the Holocaust isn't diminished by acknowledging other victim groups.
That's right, and the mistake everybody makes when they deal with that is they presume that to include is to equate, and that's very also to compare is to equate, and it's an intellectual mistake that many people make. And part of what I always remind everybody on this is that we all, from high school on, we're taught to compare and contrast, to do both. In the same way that, for example, if I say my love is like a red, red rose, I mean it's fragrant. I don't mean when I tell my wife that my love is like a red, red rose, I don't mean that if I don't put it in water, it will fall apart over the next 2-3 days.
But Michael, do you think we're seeing progress in terms of including some other? I mean, obviously, Romas have been included as a victim group in the Holocaust. Is it likely that we're going to see more progress in terms of recognizing Serbs as a victim group in the Holocaust? Because still, you don't really see that mentioned.
I don't think that that's going to happen quite as quickly because they were not a decisive victim group of the Nazis. In other words, I think that the general definition of the Holocaust is that it is that which was perpetrated by the Germans primarily, though again, we're increasingly understanding, for example, in the Holocaust by bullets, in the murders that occurred in Eastern Europe and the Soviet-held territories, that there were a variety of perpetrators. Lithuanians killed their own Jews, Latvians killed their own Jews. In Estonia, all the killing was done by Estonians, of Jews was done by Estonians, not by Germans. So there's going to be a greater inclusion. Let me say that the most important thing for understanding this is to get the scholarship right. We have a principle in history, which is good scholarship ordinarily drives out bad scholarship. So the more we know, the more we understand how to contextualize it and how to understand it. And again, the greater the interest, that means the greater that other creative people will be able to address this and to grapple with it.
I want to call on some other people who have raised their hands here. Michael Lehman, did you have a question for our guests today?
Yes, I have, Barry. My question is to Michael Borenstein and also
Berenbaum.
you, Barry.
Yeah.
Berenbaum. And to you, Barry, is the fact that the late Professor Vladimir Dedijer wrote in his book, Yugoslav, Auschwitz, and the Vatican, that it was the Catholic Church, it was the Vatican that was the main engine behind the Holocaust, that in fact, Ustashi, due to their size, they could never control the country the size of West Germany for one day. But with the Catholic Church, with the Vatican, with its organizations and sub-organizations, they could lock hold of power and take over like they did with Ante Pavlich and Andrew Tukovic and Archbishop Alois Stepanic. And this seemed to have played out also in the recent Rwandan genocide. That was the Catholic Church once again behind a lot of the atrocities. And I just wanted your comments on that. Thank you.
Michael, do you want to say something about that?
Well, I disagree with that reading of the history. Look, the Catholic, number one, we're now allowed access into Vatican documents, and we're going to learn a hell of a lot more about the Vatican than we knew before, because under Pope Francis, we've been given free and open access, and people will have to go in there and do the hard work. And in fact, the hard work is going to be linguistically dependent, because there are multiple languages in which material arrived in the Vatican, and one of the languages that's going to be important as well is, ironically, Latin. And we have the post-classics generation has been very weak on Latin. Secondly, I think the Germans were not only a Roman Catholic society, but a deeply Protestant society as well. Germany itself was divided between Catholic and Protestant. The important element of what we're going to discover in the Catholic Church, what we're going to understand, and let me say that one of the dissonant elements in the film was to see the nuns in their role about transforming the youth and brainwashing the youth to become Croatians rather than Serbians, and the change of that. We normally look at a nun and see somebody who is like the religious order of Sister of Mercy, who's working in hospitals and teaching in orphanages and doing all of that. And to see them in a perpetrator role or assisting in ethnic cleansing was contrary to every type of expectation that we had. But with regard to the Vatican, the most interesting question that I'm going to look at is what information came to the Vatican, when did it come to the Vatican, and what did they do with that information? Because remember, the Vatican had people in every segment of the genocide and every segment of the war, because it had priests who traveled with both armies, with the American and Allied armies, with the German armies. It had priests on the ground in every city in German-occupied Poland. It had priests throughout this region. They reported through the apostolic delegate or the papal nuncio in a neutral fashion. And while they could not indicate the specific contents of confession, they certainly could give a general picture of what was happening. And we know in case after case after case of information that was to be transmitted to the Vatican. Think of the case of Kurt Gerstein, who indicated the nature of the gassing that was taking place. We know in each of these cases the manner and the way in which the information was communicated to the Vatican. Now we will know what was done with that and what they understood and how they understood it. Give you one footnote, which is intriguing, of what we already know from the new access to the Vatican archive. There was a cable sent to Rabbi Stephen Wise on August 29th, 1942, which indicated that in German headquarters under consideration is the final solution to the Jewish problem. The spoken of is between 3.5 and 4 million murdered, use of prussic acid, etc., etc. The next part of the telegram says something intriguing. We transmit this information with all due deliberation, as exactitude cannot be determined. And informants said to have the highest contact in Hitler's headquarters, and his reports have generally been deemed reliable. Now notice the last half of the telegram, which does what we in America say in post 9/11, gives the boundaries of what was known and what was unknown about the intelligence. Right? We transmit exactitude cannot be determined. Informant said to have highest contacts. That's a little weaker contact than known to have high have highest contacts. His reports generally have been reliable. Doesn't say reports have always been reliable. So it transmits intelligence information. Rabbi Wise went to the State Department to find out what they knew. The State Department says, we don't know anything at that point. And they said, but give us a little bit of time and we will get back to you on this information. In November, they came back to Rabbi Wise and said, we can now confirm your darkest fears. They then screwed Wise because Wise went public with that information. And when he went public, the State Department said, we neither can confirm nor deny his reports. What we now know is that one of the things they did was to go to the Vatican and see what they knew about what was happening to the Jews. And that will also put in a different context the nature of the statement that was made around Christmas time of 1942, without mentioning the Jews, about the ethnic issues, the racial issues that were happening, a sort of half-strong, I would use the term half-assed statement by the Vatican, but and the like. So we're going to know a lot more over the next 4 or 5 years as historians do the very tough work of writing history.
I wanted to call on Tom Georgievich. He actually did put some questions into chat earlier. Tomislav, do you want to ask some questions? Tomislav, are you there? You have to unmute. Tomislav is not there. Are you there, Tomislav? Are you there? No? Okay. We'll move on. I think you haven't. Oh, there you. Did you unmute? You have to unmute. Unmute. That little icon in the bottom left hand of your box there. Okay. Well, John Bosnich has been waiting patiently for a while. So John, you go ahead. Unmute, unmute. There you go.
All right. Yeah, Tom, that unmute, if you're on a Mac, it's in the upper right-hand corner of your little window in the screen. First of all, I can't put into words how happy I am that this film has been made, and the achievement is monumental, and it's not just an icebreaker. I think that it's going to change. It's going to generally change the politics of the region in real life. I wanted to talk a little bit about the subject of reparations, because I think that if we establish through the depiction of historically provable events, then there's no evading the fact that reparations are due, regardless of any time limits or statute of limitations. And I think that this is why it's so important that the films and the presentation of this information be historically correct. And so what I did want to do is ask right away a first question. I have another one after, but the first question is, Michael Berenbaum, are you prepared to stay on as an external consultant to future films, perhaps by other producers in the region, and to bring more people into this aspect? Because reparations will be a natural consequence of the exposing of these facts. And we do need people who are of unassailable historians' credentials to certify what is being filmed and being presented.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things. Number one, I'm available to any legitimate and historically accurate. I joke that sometimes I play in Hollywood the role of the rabbi who says kosher or non-kosher, meaning you can or cannot do that. I'll also tell you a story which is a little bit. When my wife came to our marriage, she brought with her into our marriage a handyman. She had been a single woman, and she had a handyman who did all the fixing of things around the house with her. About halfway through our first year of marriage, the handyman turned to my wife and said, "Melissa, dear, do me a favor, call me before your husband starts to fix things. It'll be cheaper and faster." Man robbed me of my manhood and my sense of trying to protect my new bride and the like. But I give you, I joke sometimes with people who make Holocaust movies, which is they call me only after it's broken.
Right.
And give you a cute example. I won't mention the film. There was a film that was dealing with the Holocaust in Warsaw. And all of a sudden, it had a scene of Jews wearing yellow stars, and even Jews wearing yellow stars before the Germans invaded Poland. The problem with that is that in Warsaw, Jews did not wear yellow stars. They wore armbands with a Jewish star, normally white armbands with a Jewish star. And secondly, nobody put a Jewish star on Jews before the Germans invaded. Just wasn't done. Now, you think that that's a minor problem, but it's a major problem. So they had to artificially, instead of reshooting each scene, they had to artificially remove the yellow stars and put on the white thing. And I joked to them and I said, you know, it would have been much cheaper to call me in advance to avoid the problem than to post haste do it. So I'm interested in films being done by people who want to remain faithful to history. And now I'm going to say something to you, John, that's going to be unpopular.
That's okay.
If you want to get the history right, wait about reparations. And Elie Wiesel once said it, our opponents believe that when we talk about memory, we're really interested in money. And what he said now is, and if we talk about money, let's remember that memory is the ultimate goal.
This is true.
And consequently, if you want good history and good, look, history's done differently by lawyers who are bringing a case. And there may be some lawyers here, and I'm married to a lawyer, so I'm quite aware of it. You know, I sometimes joke I am not a lawyer, but I sleep with a lawyer, my wife. But having said that, if you want to write good history, forget for a while about the legal case and do the good history and get it done, and get it done for the sake of writing good history. Then raise the question of reparations, and reparations become deeply divisive because the first thing you want a society to do is to come to terms with its history. And look, we're seeing that in America, right? People are now fighting over the question of Confederate memory and Confederate memorials and all of that. And this is 160, the Civil War was in 1860 to 1865. We're now in 2021. So it's 161 years after it. And we're still worried about the question of what does memory and what is the implications of memory. And then imagine if we get into this issue of money and all of that. So there's one issue that I've stayed away from in all of my work on Holocaust history and education. I've never touched the question of reparations because I want to be writing truthful history. and let others worry about reparations, because sometimes it becomes an appearance of money, money, money. And money can corrupt even people of great integrity. But my dad had a famous a line that I've always admired. My father said, every man, and he did not include women in the statement, so we'll only do it for male gender. He said, my father said, every man has his price. What makes most of us honest is we always raise our price beyond what it's worth, what we're worth.
Bravo. The second part, I would like to just ask this. I mean, I have no idea what the motivation was for the journalists who obviously did a hit job on the movie in their commentaries. I don't know if it was ignorance or if it was malice. It could be different in each case. But I do know that during the war, because I was a reporter during the breakup of the former Yugoslavia, I do know that the US State Department took direct control over Croatia's communication system and their PR system. And the US State Department directly recruited 500 people to run Croatian PR and sent them to Croatia, 500 Americans. And I also know that the US State Department recruited as many Jews as they could to speak against Serbs. So I think there's a problem inside the US State Department, and it's a very deep-rooted problem, and it persists regardless of who the president of the United States is. And I think that that's an issue that's very hard to address. I have two friends who work in the State Department right now, and they are under such supervision and monitoring that they can't even use their own family home phone to call their wife, because it's so centrally controlled. And I think that we've got a long way to go if we don't realize that this is centrally organized. It's not the random journalist here and there who may be misinformed or may have malice. There are lots of potential reasons for attacking Serbs. We've gone through 30 years of anti-Serb propaganda from the top down. 30 years. That's a person who's 30 years old now. When he was born, from the date of his birth till today, he's 31. So 30 years of uncontested anti-Serbianism in the lying mainstream media of the West, not just America. You can go on a holiday from America and you can go to Paris with your wife to go and see the Eiffel Tower, and you can pick up an English copy of the International Herald Tribune, or you can pick up some French newspapers if you read them, and they're also anti-Serb till today. So there is you know, I use the word conspiracy all the time because I've taken part in conspiracies myself, so I know they exist. I worked for 3 governments at the top. Everything in politics is a conspiracy until you announce it. Everything is. Everything is a need to know secret meeting where you decide what the policy and what the program will be, and you control in advance what the damage might be. And then you announce it to the public. There's no political organization that doesn't operate by conspiracy. And I see here a conspiracy inside the State Department against Serbs in specific. That may be because of our stubborn nature. That may be because we haven't joined NATO or the EU. But I think that this is a root problem that goes beyond the filmmaking and the historian aspect. It's a state-directed hate campaign against the nation, which has only a few analogies in history, and one of them is Goebbels' hate literature against the Jews.
Let's say one thing, that yesterday, for the first time in 105 years, the American government recognized the Armenian genocide.
Yes.
First time in 105. I'm sorry, it's 104 years that it recognized the Armenian genocide, and they used the G word. Now,
Genocide, exactly.
The G word is like you know, is like we don't say the F word, we merely talk about the F word. And the reason that you have the G word is because once you recognize something as genocide, you have legal consequences according to the Genocide Convention. So consequently, I know for a fact that the State Department refused to use the G word in Yugoslavia in the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s. They did everything imaginable. And why do I know it? Because the people who were in the dissent channel of the State Department spoke openly about that at the seminars in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum when I was at the Memorial Museum. So there are reasons for this happening, and there's always there's a dissent channel in the State Department in which some of this occurs. I'm not aware of things you're aware of. I haven't studied that area, so I can't make a comment on that.
I just wanted to say that the announcement about the Armenian genocide from the US government came 47 hours after Turkey finalized its departure from the F-35 fighter bomber project. 47 hours after Turkey said, we're not going to be your ally in your military industrial complex and pay billions of dollars for your planes, the United States announced that the Armenian genocide was a genocide. That's how politics is done at the president and prime minister level. I've sat in at meetings like that. Nothing to do with morals at all. They're not buying our reactors. When Japan was refusing to buy the Fukushima, do you know that the Fukushima reactor was made by General Electric? Nobody knows it. It's not discussed. And do you know that it was forced on Japan because Japan had a trade surplus in automobiles? Yes. The same series of reactor that melted down in 3 Mile Island was forced on Japan. Politics goes beyond the moral level. And that's what we've got to deal with. And it's the State Department that does this kind of thing. They're not buying our F-35. Okay, then they did genocide against the Armenians. They couldn't care less about the Armenians, just like Hitler said. Who remembers the Armenians? Nobody. And I worked, I have to say that when I was working in Washington for a year and a half, my #1 advisor on everything I did was Aram Hamparian, the head of the ethnic Armenian lobby. And he said, we have to continue forever because somewhere, sometime, something is going to crack and we will be let through by accident. And that's what happened here. The recognition of the genocide against the Armenians was let through because they want to punish Turkey, not because they care about Armenians. They couldn't care less. Sorry.
John, let's let, I think
just
Tomislav,
sharing my sad experiences in Washington.
Tomislav, were you able to fix your mute? Yes, I think you have.
Yes, I was. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Tomislav, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Sorry about that, everybody. I had to drop off my Mac and then from my iPad and go to my Android. First of all, thank you very much, Barry and Michael, Gaga, and everyone for all your hard work on this project. I can't believe we've gotten to this day. A couple of quick points. Number one, regarding distribution. I have a friend in Australia who wants to see the film. Will it be screened there? And if not, will it be distributed on outlets at time or paid YouTube, things of that sort? That's my first question. Then I have a follow-up question.
It'll be on a video on demand, and it's going to be accessible and available. I will know more details. I'll keep you posted in the next week or two. Yes, it will be. Yeah, and then the question was only this theatrical distribution per se, but yes, it will be covered. But our intention is not only to have the movie on some, VOD systems, but also platforms, but also to have a movie run by national televisions wherever we can master that. In other words, that it goes on a regular network in whichever country we can kind of get that and secure that, because that will go then beyond the normal, oh, this movie might interest me. Okay, let me see the movie. But this will be a step up, and we are talking to a number of countries, and we'll see how and what we will accomplish. But the answer is yes, yes, it will be. It's been, worked on very, very, carefully but diligently by 101 Studios here in the States.
What was your
Thank you very
follow-up,
much. I think,
Tomislav?
yes, thank you very much, because I think Australia is an important market because large number of Serbs there, as well as Croats. My second question is regarding Mr. Weisberg, and I posted my response to him on Variety. What I really resented was his use of kind of corny, quote unquote. Is it the aspect, and I hope you have a chance in some time to have a Zoom meeting with him or something like that, regarding his bias. He is a well-known filmmaker, film critic who's based in Rome. Is it the aspect of the influence possibly from the Vatican or from other circles why he would have such a malice towards us? Thank you.
What we do know, and obviously as John said earlier, you can't prove it. You can't say for certain, this non-reviews or other political comments came about this or that way. But Mr. Weisberg is the consultant on Sarajevo Film Festival for a very long time, and regularly has some sort of classes in Croatia as well. And he never reviewed through this time being present, living in Rome and being present in the former Yugoslavia, a single Serbian movie, not even a review, in other words, good or bad, which means he mostly was still interested in Bosnian, meaning Bosnian Muslim, movies and Sarajevo Film Festival and the Croatian movies. It seemed to us that since there was embargo on the reviews, it was the 25th of January this year, 6 o'clock in the morning, which means the journalists and the people, critics were able to see the movie before, but they were obligated not to write before that scheduled day and hour. His review came first, 6 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, he posted his review, which means it was clearly a message being sent to the other people in that world of film critiques that this movie is propaganda. And the review which says it's a bad movie, which he didn't say in this particular case it's a bad movie. He didn't write about the movie, but review about the bad movie is a review about the bad movie opinion, this guy or that guy, But this was intentionally written to give the seal of that this movie is wrong because it's a propaganda. It's not, it serves some other purposes, and it's not just about filmmaking. And that was the message to Academy members. That was the message to Hollywood Foreign Press and Golden Globe, and the other people who reviewed the movie. Clearly, he had some very lots of let's say informations about the whole area. I don't know where they came from, but he was like even picked in his review a line that the Dara's mother says she's from Mirkovci, village of Mirkovci. Now listen to me carefully. There are 3 villages of Mirkovci. One was the village where basically there was a first encounter between Croatian forces and Serbian guys in this 90s war, when basically Croats sent some armed police, and basically they were met there by hostile armed party of Serbs, and there was a shooting or whatever. But no, this that's kind of in Slavonia. That's kind of a further up north and further east. City of Mirkovci we refer to from this Kozara region, because that's where all this group of people comes from. From Kozara, and they refer to Mountain Kozara. They refer in the movie, to that. But he was saying then that my selection Mirkovci as a place was like throwing wild flesh to the wolves or whatever, like I'm intentionally using that village to show that basically to wash what Serbs did to Mirkovci at the beginning of the war in 90s to Croatian armed police. And he was entirely wrong, but to go in that detail and to pick up on that, which means it's definitely, that's how he's justifying that I was trying to wash up the Serbian behavior in 90s by making a movie about Serbs in the Second World War and the Jasenovac camps. And all I'm saying is this was well studied, well prepared, well organized, and it did serve purpose. This movie got dismissed up front and never had a chance with the Academy the moment those reviews came about, because people want to be politically correct. They don't want to bother if they have a seeds of doubt, you know, is this movie politically correct or not? They're not going to vote for it, etc., which means of all almost 100 movies which were eligible for a foreign Oscar, the only our movie was labeled some sort of propaganda just because, you know, it suited, you know, some groups, you know, to do so. And I believe maybe some other journalist, you know, guy in Variety maybe went after this guy or they talked or whatever, but definitely there is some not so, let's say, intentions not so connected to the film, but rather to something else. But we will never know for sure, you know. But that Mirkovci was something which clearly showed, you know, that he even falsified that name of that village and tried to make his agenda happen.
Were you ever reviewed by the New York Times?
Never. Interesting. But movie
That's
played
really...
in New York. Never
Sorry?
reviewed.
What did you say?
I was not.
But no New York paper at all. All
that I know of.
And that's rather odd, considering that the New York Times did a lot of actually multiple articles about this film from the submission from Bosnia about Srebrenica.
That's a part of the problem we had with this movie, because they maybe felt some circles, you know, that by elevating Jasenovac's story and Serbian, you know, fate in the Second World War will somehow diminish the you know, this other movie about Serbs killing the, you know, Muslims in Srebrenica. Basically, almost will look like you're giving a Serb justification of doing so. And then clearly it's very, very murky at best, you know, and unfortunately, yet again, movie we did not have a chance to be viewed for what it is. It became like a really political issue here, but in the long run, you know, the movie is strong. It's going to find its place. You know, it's going to stay.
True. I mean, but isn't Srebrenica? Isn't that really a present day political issue? I mean, isn't that a propaganda form? Isn't that a propaganda film? That's a propaganda film.
I haven't seen the movie. I can't say anything about this, you know, except some people took some scenes from the movie and compared them with the documentary footage. They went around the internet, and then basically you see clearly exact same scene, exact same camera position, documentary version versus what's done in this movie. The problem with Srebrenica movie is that it's something which depicts basically some political conclusion of the West, what transpired there, and it did. To what extent, we don't know for sure yet. Is it horrible and horrifying? Yes, it is. But that movie does not have what kind of preceded Srebrenica, where basically out of Srebrenica they were going out and killing kids and the children, you know, villages around. Because now appears that it's just peaceful little town where all of a sudden a bunch of Serbs come in and kill everybody, and some of those people were actually soldiers. Anyway, it's just bad, horrible, and you know, one cannot deny anybody making.
Well, I wouldn't deny things that happened there. My point is that Srebrenica is a political issue that is being dealt with today by governments, whereas nobody's doing anything about Jasenovac or the Holocaust in Yugoslavia. That's not being dealt with. It's not a propaganda issue. But Srebrenica is a real propaganda issue. They have a real motive for pushing this agenda on the world to get them to, and you know, it could very well be that the whole Armenian genocide was recognized simply as a cudgel to then, or as a motive to then.
What my heart is when you kind of all of a sudden it looks like that. By making Jasenovac, you are taking away from Srebrenica, or by making Srebrenica, you are taking away from Jasenovac. It's just not right, you know.
Has nothing to do with each other. They have nothing to do.
Are correct, and then you know, and that's why I'm saying, you know, I'm glad that movie was made about Srebrenica. I wish even Serbs made a movie about Srebrenica. That's okay, but unfortunately, Croats will never make a movie about Jasenovac. It would be great if they made this movie. You know,
don't hold your breath. Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
no, I know. But I'm saying it's a sad because they're like people suffered, you know, this and that. But all of a sudden, it turns out that we were only denied when we made the movie about the victims in Jasenovac's right to do so. What the guy rightly says, this movie should have never left borders of Serbia, never to be shown to the, you know, he was angry with distributor, American distributor. And I'm saying, but why deny us that right? You know, it's a true story. Let it be told, let it be shown, and, you know, people should react. The same applies to Srebrenica, but, you know, that agenda is in a favor. We are obviously not in certain circles. Nothing you can do except, you know, keep making movies, you know, what can you do?
I know, Dragana, can you shorten your question or comment so that, because we have only 5 more minutes.
Sure, I just picked up on a few things. First of all, just wanted to state a very important fact. On 22nd April every year, we mark commemoration of the breakthrough of Jasenovac. Just wanted to ensure that everybody knows that Jasenovac was never liberated. Second thing, we spoke about the Holocaust and the Holocaust term. I'm quoting now from Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, trust that governs all Holocaust Memorial Days in Britain. It says, the Holocaust was the attempt by the Nazis and their collaborators to murder all the Jews in Europe, full stop. It's absolutely blasphemous over here. I don't know how is it in America when you say, oh, there was the Serbian Holocaust, or there was a Holocaust of the Roma Sinti people. You simply do not say that. That's factually incorrect. Genocide on Serbian, yes. Genocide Pojarmos, fine. But Holocaust is the term exclusively connected to the persecution and extermination of the Jewish people.
That's something for Michael to speak to.
Yeah. So everybody here will correct you that there was no Holocaust on Roma people or Serbian people, what have you. Third one, we spoke about Vatican archives and opening of Vatican archives. We know the role of the Vatican. If somebody wants to know the actual Vatican role, look no further than the villages of Šargovac, Drakulić, Motke, Kolman, Rakovac, and primary school in Šargovac. I descend from there, and these villages were slaughtered by a Freya Filipovic, Freya Satan, called in people. And lastly, someone mentioned reparations. As far as to my knowledge, and I'm not historian, Tito waived the reparations, and as a gesture of goodwill. And in turn, Germany gave him a couple of old dismantled factories. And lastly, we need to get our facts straight. We talked about Armenian genocide. I posted a little link in the chat about 106th anniversary the RT has made. How can someone, a country, recognize a genocide on Serbian people when Serbia hasn't done that themselves? To this day, Serbia has not recognized a genocide of their own people. Republika Srpska has, with the declaration of the International Commission in 2016, but Republika Srpska is an entity, it's not a country. So how can you go to Variety or LA Times and say, hey guys, there was a genocide? Oh, and they will turn around to you and say, your own country hasn't recognized what you're talking about.
Michael has to leave. So I want Michael to respond to one of the points, at least one of the points that you raised.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barry. I wrote, I don't mean to duck your question, but I wrote that I had to leave at 2 o'clock before you had asked your question. Look, there is a debate as to what the specific nature of the Holocaust is definitionally. There are those who say it is the equivalent of the final solution to the Jewish question, or to the Jewish problem, which means it engages Jews alone. There are those who argue that it includes the totality of Nazi victims who have to be included, including especially the Roma, because the Roma were the only other people aside from a small group of Soviet POWs who were gassed at Birkenau, and their experience closely paralleled the Jews, although there was no idea of the final solution to the quotation marks Roma problem. There are people who argue for an exclusivist notion of it. This was the Wiesenthal-Wiesel, Simon Wiesenthal-Elie Wiesel debate of the 1980s. And we have, in the work that I've done, we've tried to include the totality of the Nazi victims in order to understand what was singular and unique about the Jewish experience. So I can present the multiple arguments on both sides, but England, I haven't seen the English definition that's being used, but there are both views that are prevalent. And I think that in all fairness, all victims should be included in order to understand what was singular about the final solution to the Jewish problem. Let me just give you a couple of examples. You cannot speak of the origin of gassing without considering the German T4 program. The T4 program, which is the murder of the handicapped. And the reality is that that program originated the gas chambers as the instrumentality of destruction. The staff of that program graduated to bigger and quotation marks better things with the murder of, they went to staff the Action Reinhardt camps and the like. You can't understand the difference between the re-education program versus the annihilation program without understanding the difference of the German treatment toward the male homosexuals in Germany and Austria and parts of Czechoslovakia, as opposed to the policy toward the Jews, which is annihilation. You can't understand the nature of the final solution to the Jewish problem without understanding that Nazi policy toward the Gypsies varied from country to country and from place to place as to the nature of priority, intentionality, totality, and like. I could go on with that, but I have to, and I apologize, I have to get on another Zoom call, and they're already calling me that I am late. So that's the answer to your question as best as I can do it.
Before you leave, what other projects in terms of films are you working on?
Well,
this goes for both you and Gaga, actually.
We'll let Gaga answer it, and Gaga and I may be involved in another type of film, but I'll let him talk about it. I am involved in multiple museum projects. Remember, I came into films through museums, not through films. and I'm involved in multiple museum projects at this moment. There will be films that come from that. I'm involved in 3 film projects relating to museums, and then one which is a generalized one, but I'm not at liberty to talk about the one generalized one at this moment. Thank you, and I apologize for having to.
Thank you for joining.
Just tell them, Michael. Just tell them you were dealing with some Serbs. We're late for everything. That'll explain it all.
Okay.
I have like, thank you, Michael. I have like 3% of the battery left.
Oh no!
Inviting us today. It was a great conversation. Let's keep in touch. Let's continue.
Yes.
We have a few projects. We might do a documentary on the fate of the Jews in Kosovo, because there was a lot of misrepresentation by Kosovo government, that they treated them, in such a way that they were like saviors, etc., etc. But the facts were different. There is a great study written about that, and we will put that in works among the other things, obviously. But that could be quite also interesting to learn how that and what happened there, because they made a big publicity stunt here that they were like saving and saviors, Jews in Kosovo and Albania, but the facts were totally different. But anyway, that's something. Thank you, guys. Off I go, and let's
Thank you, Gaga. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it. And thank you, everyone, for a wonderful conference. And we'll see each other again soon, I hope. We'll be in touch. I'll say goodbye. I've recorded the proceedings, and hopefully we will be able to post that in the near future. So let's view it again in the future. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you,
for organizing
Barry.
this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So long.
Bye.
Bye.